You ever wake up one morning and just know, deep in your bones, that today is the day something's got to give? That's how this whole mess started. And if you told me then that a stubborn rooster, a silver Bentley, and a woman named Karen would wind up flipping my quiet world on its head, well, I probably would have laughed you off my porch. But here we are. I'm just ready to most folks a third-generation farmer with dirt in my veins, living on land my family's worked longer than anybody in Riverstone Reserve's even been alive. The truth is, I never wanted much. The farm, a red barn built by hands tougher than mine, the smell of alfalfa in the dawn, goats bleating, chickens scratching. 21 years in the Army Corps taught me how to fix just about anything but heartbreak. I lost my wife to a brain aneurysm while I was overseas, came home to a folded flag and an empty house echoing her laugh. So I buried myself in this dirt, the only thing that made sense, keeping my head down, fixing fences, tending to animals, and maybe running a little behind on barn paint and fence lines, but who's counting? Used to be, there wasn't a neighbor for a mile in any direction, just wildflowers, fence posts, the occasional deer. Then, out of nowhere, the developers showed up. They called it Riverstone Reserve, though there's not a river for 5 miles, and city folks moved in with shiny cars and stricter lawns. The day that big bronze HOA sign went up at the end of my gravel drive, something inside me said, here we go. At first, I tried to be nice. Dropped off sweet tea for the construction guys. But soon as those houses filled up, the complaints rolled in like summer storms. You could see it coming a mile away, BMWs and Teslas in the drive. Landscaping crews every Tuesday, people who measure community in hedges and paint colors, not in how you help a neighbor bale hay. The first trouble was the mail. HOA notices slipped in by mistake, warnings about barn aesthetics and roosters crowing too early. I call and say, hey, I'm not in your HOA. They'd apologize, then send another letter. Next came code enforcement, a county guy who took one look at my barn and laughed. Built better than half those new houses, he said, slapping the old beams. But the message was clear. I was supposed to change or get out of the way. Then Karen moved in, blonde, confident, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. First day, she comes over. The rooster woke me up at 5, she says, like that's a personal insult. He does that. I reply, and that's when I knew this was just the start. Karen didn't just settle in, she colonized. Within a month, she was HOA president, pushing through rules about mailbox height, Halloween inflatables, even the color of mulch. If you've never seen grown adults forced to take down ghost decorations by a woman in yoga pants, let me tell you, it's something else. I stayed out of IT. I wasn't in their world. Their rules didn't touch my land. But Karen didn't need jurisdiction, just an excuse. She started with friendly suggestions. Maybe I could paint the barn to match the neighborhood. Maybe I could quiet down the animals. I ignored her. She escalated. Pretty soon, there were cameras pointed at my barn, complaints filed about farm smells, photos of my nephew tossing feed with a note. Is this safe? And then this is where you know it's not about rules. It's about power. Karen set up a fake email to my regular egg customers, warning them about failed inspections that never happened. That was her playbook. Twist the system until you couldn't tell right from wrong. Just tired from exhausted. I got tired of being nice. Started documenting everything. I installed my own cameras, kept every note, every email, every complaint. And then one morning, I come out to find her Bentley parked smack in front of my barn doors on my land. At first, I think maybe she broke down. But then I see the chalk smiley face on the gravel and realize, no, this is a message. So I knock on her door. She answers in silk pajamas, sipping coffee. Oh, I thought that was shared use, she says, all innocence. It's not, I tell her, and give her 10 minutes to move it before I do. She calls my bluff. So I fire up the tractor, ease the bucket under that car, and lift just enough to move it. Not to damage, not yet. She comes running, filming, threatening lawsuits. You'll pay for this, she yells. I already have, I say, thinking about every morning she's turned into a chess game. Sheriff shows up later, watches the footage, and says probably best not to move cars with heavy machinery, but I'm in the right. Next comes the vandalism fence cut, animals loose, another round of complaints about unsightly structures. This time, they send an HOA inspector. I call the sheriff, who tells the guy to leave or face trespass charges. And that's when I get serious. I dig up every land deed, zoning letter, and even call in an old Army buddy who's now head of zoning. Within days, the county confirms my land is outside the HOA. Karen gets confronted by county officials. She unravels, but doubles down spray paint on my gate. More letters, the whole circus. But something funny happens. The rest of the neighborhood starts noticing. A board member Elise writes to say she doesn't agree with Karen, that most folks are tired of the drama. Even a retired teacher down the block offers up a recording of Karen scheming to push Ray out. Suddenly, I'm not fighting alone. By the time we get to court, my lord and yell, mean as a snake and twice as quick lays out the whole saga. Footage, letters, testimony. The judge is having none of Karen's Victim Act. Dismisses her emergency order. Then, after the next round, hits her with damages and legal fees. When the dust settles, the HOA apologizes, Karen is forced out, her house for sale within a month. But it's not just about winning in court. I take the settlement and start farm truth little tours, classes, community get-togethers. Neighbors, even the HOA folks, start coming over, sharing stories, laughing at the rooster's early alarms. The fence line that was once a battlefront becomes a meeting spot. The old barn stands, the goats still bleat, and the land me land goes on like it always has. And here's the part one want you to remember. The system only wins if you let it tell your story. I stayed, I documented, I told the truth louder than the lies. I outlasted the tantrum, and the peace that followed that's something you can't buy with a Bentley or enforce with a fine. Now, when a new family moves in, they don't ask about HOA rules, they ask how to raise chickens, how to grow tomatoes, how to belong. You tell me, was I right to fight? Or was Karen just doing her job? Drop your answer below, share your craziest neighbor story. And if you believe land still matters in America, you know what to do, hit subscribe and let your voice be heard. Because sometimes the only thing standing between your peace and someone else's control is a stubborn old farmer with a camera, a tractor, and a whole lot of history to protect. You know, I'd love to tell you that after all that a court win, Karen moving out, peace settling in like morning fodget was just smooth sailing, but life's got a sense of humor, doesn't it? Out here, trouble's a little like crabgrass. You think you've pulled it all up, but there's always something sneaking in under the fence. Still, for a while, things were quieter than they'd been in years. The air smelled sweeter, like fresh hay and wood smoke instead of tension. My little project, Farm Truth, started drawing more folks from town kids, parents, even a few of those Riverstone folks who once wouldn't look me in the eye. Funny thing happened that winter. Not long after the last court date, I started noticing small changes. A young couple bought Karen's place, a nurse and a paramedic, good people. The first week they moved in, the guy came by with a six-pack, said he'd always wanted to learn about goats. We talked till dark, swapping stories about call shifts and stubborn animals. That night, I sat on my porch, feeling something I hadn't in years, hope that maybe, just maybe, fences could do more than just keep things out. But you ever get that feeling you're being watched? Not in a spooky way, more like someone's waiting for you to mess up. The HOA board, well, most of them kept their distance, but every now and then, I'd catch a glance at the feed store or find a friendly reminder slipped in my mailbox. Nothing official, just suggestions. You should consider updating your driveway. Maybe install new lighting. Always voluntary, but you know how that goes. Spring rolled in on the wind, wet, stubborn, everything blooming at once. I kept busy with Farm Truth, planting a bigger garden, welcoming more kids from the elementary school. One Saturday, I'm walking a group of fourth graders past the barn when one of the moms asks, all nervous, "Do you really not have any HOA rules here?" I laugh. Just the ones Mother Nature writes. The kids thought that was hilarious. The mom looked like she was weighing her options. Maybe she was. You'd think things would keep heading up. But sometimes the past doesn't let go so easy. It started with a rumora whisper that Riverstone Reserve was reviewing its property lines, talking about voluntary integration for adjacent lots. I laughed it off at first. Then, like clockwork, a certified letter arrived. Dear Mr. Dillard, Riverstone Reserve invites you to join the community as an associate member. Participation is voluntary, but compliance with standards is encouraged. Encouraged, there's a word that means trouble in a suit and tie. Let me back up a sec. If there's one thing you learn living out here, it's that boundaries matter. Land isn't just dirt, it's memory, it's family, it's peace of mind. I didn't spend all those months fighting Karen just to sign it all away for the promise of shared landscaping and access to a community pool I'd never use. I posted the letter on the barn wall right next to my county zoning exemption so visitors could get a good look at what stubborn really means. But the board didn't give up so easy. A couple of times, I caught folks from Riverstone walking the fence line, tape measures in hand, pretending to look at birds. Then, the anonymous flyers started showing up. Did you know joining the HOA can increase your property value? As if I gave a damn. I guess they figure if they couldn't scare me, maybe they could sweet-talk me. Meanwhile, Farm Truth kept growing. Local teachers brought classes. Neighbors dropped off extra produce. Even a new Riverstone family started stopping by, sheepish at first. We heard about the court case. We're sorry it got so ugly. I told them the truth. It wasn't ugly. It was necessary. Sometimes you have to hold your ground, or you end up with nothing but regrets. There was one moment that stuck with me. A teenage boy from the neighborhood sneakers muddy, hair sticking up like hay, showed up with his dad and asked if I'd help him build a chicken coop for his school project. The dad looked nervous, glancing at the edge of the property like Karen might pop out with a clipboard. I shrugged and said, "Long as you don't mind early mornings and chicken poop, let's get started." That coop took 2 weekends, 3 arguments about wood screws, and more laughs than I'd had in months. Of course, the HOA sent a notice about non-standard outbuildings visible from the main road. But by then, nobody paid much attention. The tide had shifted. Even Alice, the board member who once kept quiet, started coming by with casseroles and stories. You know, she said once, sitting on a hay bale, people used to think Karen was protecting the neighborhood. Turns out she was just protecting her control. We both laughed, then went back to painting the new sign for Farm Truth. Respect the land. Respect each other. It wasn't all sunshine, though. One morning, I found another anonymous letter, this one more threatening. If you don't integrate, we'll pursue compliance through county channels. I took it to Danielle, my lawyer, who just grinned. They don't have a legal leg to stand on, Ray. They're just hoping you'll get tired. I wasn't tired. Not anymore. So when Riverstone invited me to speak at their annual meeting, I said yes. I stood in front of a room full of folks who'd once called code enforcement on my barn and told them what it's like to have your home, your history, questioned by people who see land as a backdrop, not a birthright. I said, if you want to be good neighbors, start by listening, not dictating. Grow a garden. Share the fence line. And if a rooster wakes you up, count your blessings, Siri, still living somewhere the world hasn't paved over yet. There was a long pause. Nobody clapped, but nobody argued either. Afterwards, a handful of folks came up to shake my hand. One woman said her daughter wanted to plant sunflowers out front, but the HOA said no. I said, plant them anyway. Sometimes you gotta break a rule to start a tradition. You know what I realized? In the end, it was never about the barn or the Bentley or even Karen. It was about standing your ground when it matters, letting the land teach you patience, letting the community teach you forgiveness. The world isn't run by rule books. It's run by people, and sometimes the loudest voice isn't right, just loud. So, if you're still listening, let me ask you, where do you draw your line? What's worth protecting, even when it's hard? Drop your stories down below. Tell me about your own fence line battles, your impossible neighbors, your tiny victories. And if you believe in the kind of community where a handshake means more than a letterhead, hit subscribe, share your thoughts, and remember, the only rules that matter are the ones that leave room for grace.